our parents got hit with that first big wave of second wave feminism propaganda, like the Gloria Steinem and the Betty Friedan stuff that was so incredibly, like, they didn't have alternative media even, which we do now. Like, once you hit about the year 2000, you at least have some alternative media, you have some voices that started to challenge things, but you know, our parents didn't have that at all. So like, my mom was thoroughly convinced that all the world's problems are because of men, and because men are violent, and because men are bad and they're evil. They said, if we also can vote, like, it's going to cause strife between husbands and wives, because women think differently, they have different interests. You know, our maternal instinct is going to cause us to, you know, make different choices than our husbands might make, and it's going to cause strife and division within the home, and that's bad. They said, we don't want to be considered equal with men, because then what if they want to draft us? By far, like I said, by far the best situation for kids is with both married biological parents. Right. That situation has the least amount of like addiction, abuse of all types, like emotional, physical, sexual abuse, any type of abuse. It produces the most stable kids with the lowest risk of all the negative outcomes, less likely to end up in juvie, less likely to end up homeless, less likely to end up with addiction. I mean, this seems very intuitive, and it's like, how did we forget these things, and how did we just go along with this agenda? But the propaganda was so powerful. Like I said, you had in the 60s, you had them firing off all kinds of fake statistics, which they still do now. They'll say things like, oh, 1 in 3 women on college campuses experiences SA. And I kept finding over and over that so many of them were involved in occult type practices. Things like spirit mediumship, automatic writing, tarot card reading, some cases open Luciferianism, like open Satanism, from a feminist perspective. They like actually went through the whole Bible and wrote a commentary on each chapter of the Bible and turned it into a female liberation thing, and had like this Luciferian Gnostic reading of the Bible. You can buy that to this day if you go on Amazon. It's called The Woman's Bible. A lot of the women have grown up with this, and they think it's real. Like, this is why you see girls going to Antifa protests and like trying to kick the shit out of like big ass patriot dudes in their flip-flops and their leggings, and then they get knocked out and they have no idea what happened. Culture is saturated with this. Every movie, every TV show, every song that, you know, is the most popular song is going to have a theme of women's liberation, and I can do what boys can do, and I can do it better, and I don't need a man, and I'm going to do it all myself. And so it's extremely tough to find a woman who doesn't have this mindset, because she doesn't even probably know that she has it.
Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called sons of God.
Rachel, it's an honor. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
No, thank you. Super excited to have you on. I think what you specialize in, or at least what you wrote a book about, occult feminism, is so relevant to every single listener here, because it's impacting like all of our lives in so many different ways. You know, while this is it's a podcast primarily aimed at godly men, I think that there are so many fathers and brothers and sons and that just want to know how they can serve and lead, which to me is the same thing, the women in their lives. And we're up against a lot. And so, you know, it's such an honor to bring you on here to maybe add some clarity and some understanding there.
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to do that. That's what I'll try to do. Like you said, this is a much more important topic than people would realize. Like when people ask me, like, why is this your thing? It's because I realized years ago that this is like feminism and where it came from and how we got here with all of this. It's the biggest cultural shift. It's the biggest social revolution in all of human history. There's not anything else you can point to that has changed daily life for human beings as much, as fast as feminism has in the last 100 years. And it affects everything about your life. And we don't think about it, because if you're born after like 1960, it's just the water you're swimming in. You've been, you know, in this ethos since you were born. So you don't even realize like how different things are than they were 100 years ago on every level.
That's nuts. I definitely want to like really hear you go into that and like kind of quantify that and give us understanding on that. And but I guess first and foremost, as usual, let them know who you are, how you got into this. You're such a wealth of knowledge, how that came about. And I've seen you off and on the interwebs for years, and I'm like, she nailed it. Like, that was awesome. So it's such an honor. So yeah, I guess a little bit of background for everyone.
Yeah, well, first and foremost, I'm a mom and a wife, so that's my real job, right? This is something I do kind of part-time and on the side in my spare time. Some women like shopping, some women like crafts. I like studying the history of, social engineering and primarily feminism. And the reason I kind of got into that is I had my first daughter when I was 20. And I was always like a smart kid who was in gifted classes and stuff going through school. And it was like beaten into my brain from preschool on that I was going to go to college and get a degree and do something important with my life, right? And that had to be a career. Nobody ever even suggested that it could be raising the next generation of kids or supporting my husband, my church, my community, my family. It had to be get a college degree and have a career, right? And once you're done with that, you can think about a family. But that's
Right.
just, I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and it was like the Go Girl era. We had like She-Ra, we had Oprah, we had all these strong, independent women. The propaganda really hit right in about 1980. So when I decided not to go to college, even though I had a scholarship, everybody around me freaked out. And I had the only person who didn't was my dad. My dad kind of understood because he was like, yeah, school isn't always really for smart people. Honestly, it's not really about learning and it's not really about learning how to think. It's more about checking boxes and sitting in a seat and turning in things on time and stuff like that for the most part.
We're great.
And I just had enough with the K through 12 that I couldn't fathom like 4 more years of education
Yeah.
for me because my experience in school was getting in trouble for asking too many questions. It was, getting in trouble for finishing my work ahead of time and not waiting for the rest of the class. And so I was just kind of jaded about school and didn't want to do it. And I did have a surprise pregnancy. Okay. I was living with my boyfriend,
Right.
not the best thing, would not recommend it now. Okay. In my defense, though, I had a really tough situation at home. Like I had a really tough home life. My parents were divorced. My mom's got multiple like severe mental illnesses. There's a lot of really rough things going on at home. So for me in the situation I was in, I'll cut myself a bit of slack because my choices were either live with my boyfriend who was a nice guy and we got along fine and there was no problems, or like live back home with people who were throwing things and smashing stuff and screaming all the time. And there was, cops being called and it was really bad. Right. So still
Mhm.
wouldn't recommend moving in with the boyfriend. I tell my kids not to do that because it didn't work out for us. Right. I got pregnant at 20. I was happy. I was excited. I was like, okay, this is sooner than I expected, but I love the idea of being a mom. And once my daughter came, I didn't want to do anything else. I didn't care about my job anymore. I just wanted to be with her. And I remember only a couple weeks after having her, it was like everyone around me is going, it's time to go back to work. It's time to go back to work. And I'm like, what? It just seemed so backwards to me that I'm going to pay like half what I'm making at the time for a random other lady to raise my daughter. That's my job. And even the Christian conservative women around me, were like, this is what we do now. This is normal. You'll get used to it. The baby will get used to it. And I didn't want to get used to it. And so that's the first thing that got me thinking of like, why is this the norm? How did this become the way that we all do it? That's not what my grandma did. It's not what her mom did. Why are we all doing it this way? It seems so, inefficient and irrational and silly to me that all the moms have to go to work. So I started kind of like looking at the history of it because my mother was like a diehard Marxist feminist as well. And I grew up hearing all of her like angry rants about the patriarchy and how bad men are and things like that.
I was raised by
Um,
feminists too.
yeah,
And it felt, oh yeah, my mom, my grandma, my aunt. It was just hardcore. I was like Cinderella because was the only dude. I had five sisters, and so they all like
yeah,
projected their man hate. And so I
yeah.
mowing the lawn on Christmas morning while everyone else opened presents and stuff. It happened, it happened, Mom. I love you. You did great. But they're super. Boom! I want to invite you guys to the Man of Peace protocols and implementation groups. So if you've been watching the podcast and you're like, yo, this is pretty cool. I'm really liking the vibe, all the things. We have underneath the show, in the show notes, hit the link, and we have implementation groups. We meet monthly. We are a fellowship, the Man of Peace Fellowship. We have live events. We have all kinds of things. Get into the implementation groups. We meet over Zoom. We are going through life together, working on being the best sons of God, men of peace we can be. We're working on making sure that we're operating at the highest levels in spirit, soul, and body at all times. So if you love the vibe of the podcast, I want to encourage you, take the next step, go to the next level, join the implementation groups, join the actual fellowship, meet other men of peace. Let's train together. Let's work together. Let's do life together. Let's execute on the will of the Father together. Blessed are the peacemakers. You guys know the rest. Enjoy the rest of the podcast.
Yeah. And I think, our parents, me and you are probably roughly around the same age group. Our parents got hit with that first big wave of second wave feminism propaganda, like the Gloria Steinem and the Betty Friedan stuff that was so incredibly, like, they didn't have alternative media even, which we do now. Like, once you hit about the year 2000, you at least have some alternative media. You have some voices that started to challenge things, but our parents didn't have that at all. So like my mom was thoroughly convinced that all the world's problems are because of men, and because men are violent, and because men are bad and they're evil. And I started looking into it. I'm a big history nerd, have always been. And I was like, I want to go back and like read some of the things that these prominent like feminists from back in the day wrote. I want to see like what their world was like and what they were thinking and why they wanted this, right? Because to me, in the year 2001, when I have my first baby, I'm thinking, this kind of sucks. I don't know if I like this. I have to go to work and be a mom, and you got to balance everything, and you got to tell the guy that he has to help you with the chores because you're working. And it was like, I wanted to do it the way my grandma did it. My grandma mostly raised me because my house was so chaotic, and I had a wonderful grandmother who's still with us, and she's 99 years old.
Wow.
So she was born in 1926. And so listening to her growing up and spending time with her, it was like, she was more of a mother figure, and she didn't do things that way. And she raised her kids with her sisters and her mother, and they were all around and they were all together because none of them worked. And I thought, wow, that'd be so great for me if my friends and my sister were having kids and my mom was, into being a grandma, which she wasn't. She thought that was oppressive and she needed to be partying instead. Like, this is a very typical boomer grandma thing to do, right? We don't want grandkids. We're going to party and we're going to go on the cruise and have the vacations. And so I just thought, oh, it would have been so nice for me if my friends and my cousins and my sister and the women around me were also raising their kids and wanted to do that. And we all had each other, and we had community, and we had support. Yeah. How much easier and more fun would this be? And how great would it be for all the kids, instead of atomizing everyone and putting the kids in daycare, and then mom goes to work and dad goes to work, and we're all separated all day, and then we just see each other for an hour or two at night before bed. It really got me thinking about like how things were, how they are now, and like, how did we get here in such a short period of time? So when I went back and started reading the writings of feminists from the 1700s, the 1800s, the early 20th century, I found a lot of crazy stuff. I found a lot of things that they don't put in the history book. And I think I know why they don't put it in the history book. And all the pieces started coming together. Mm-hmm. And I thought, if this is supposed to be for me and my daughters, if feminism was supposed to, it made us a lot of promises that it was going to protect us from bad men, that it was going to increase our quality of living, that we were going to have autonomy and freedom and rights, and this was going to be good for us. If this is supposed to be for me, why won't you tell me the truth about it and how we got this, right? Mm-hmm. I thought that's very sneaky.
Yep. That's
So that's why as I began to dig and find more and more stuff, I would tell my husband, like, now of course I'm married. I've been with my husband for 18 years and we have a great marriage, and everything worked out for me. I got my happy ending despite like all the craziness.
yeah.
But I remember telling him the stuff I was finding. I was like, babe, you're not going to believe like this thing Susan B. Anthony said, or this thing that Elizabeth Cady Stanton did. Why didn't they put this in the history book? Why isn't this here? And he was like, I don't know, but you should probably like tell people about it because that's nuts, right?
Right.
And it's not just my opinion. I've found a paper from a wonderful professor named Joe C. Miller, who did an analysis of all of the women's history and gender studies textbooks, starting like early on when this first became a thing. And he looked at history books from even the early 20th century. And he analyzed them all as the decades went on. And he found that things like the anti-suffrage movement, which was huge and way more popular than the pro-suffrage movement, they gradually wrote it out of the history books. Like they actually over time left that stuff out, took it out. And took out a lot of the other like really important pieces of the history and just gave it this nice whitewashed look where it was like, oh yes, all the women just looked around and they went, we're oppressed and we have to do something about it. And they fought hard and they got their rights and we still have a long way to go, but women are doing better. And that's not the truth at all. So my goal with all of this is really just to set the historical record straight and at least inform people on the truth of how we got psyoped into the biggest social engineering project in all of human history and how it completely turned society upside down in a century, because that seems pretty important.
Let's go. I love it. So how did we get psyoped then? and then, and then we'll probably naturally get into how this has been such a massively impactful thing on the world and on Americans and families.
Yeah, great. So, I mean, it's got roots way back, but there's a lot of myths. There's a lot of things that if you ask the average person on the street, what was life like for women before the 19th Amendment? What would it have been like to be a woman in 1840, right before the Seneca Falls Convention? They'll probably tell you things like, women didn't have any freedom of choice. They weren't allowed to be educated. They weren't allowed to work outside the home. They couldn't have a credit card. They couldn't have a bank account. They couldn't get out of a bad divorce. And everyone's husband was beating them, right?
That
just all women,
whatever.
Yeah, almost every woman had a husband who would just come home drunk and smack her around all night and do horrible things to her, and she couldn't leave. Right? This is the picture that they've painted, and people don't realize there's billions of dollars in propaganda that has been invested to convince you of this narrative, which is not true. It is simply not true. For instance, since we started tracking in this country in 1790, women have had higher literacy rates and higher high school graduation rates than men since 1790. So it was never that, you could find times and places. Sure, if you go back to Afghanistan under the Taliban, or you go back to like peasant Russia or something, you could say maybe there were women that didn't get a lot of education or couldn't learn how to read, but it was never because they were barred from it. It wasn't because it was illegal or anyone wanted them to not have those things. It's because most people didn't. So in all the places that you find women's oppression, if you look at what the men's situation was, it was arguably worse. So like, what was life like for men in 1840? Well, most of them had to start working as children. That's why men didn't graduate high school, because usually if you were a boy and you were like 14 years old and healthy, you were going to work the farm, you were going to go to the coal mines, you were going to be conscripted into an army, because if there was a war going on, that's what happened to you as a man. So men did not enjoy this like wonderful cushy life of having a good education and having a nice job and doing whatever they wanted. It was arguably rougher for men everywhere that I've looked in history. And another thing is that people assume that all men have always had the right to vote since we've had democracy. Another huge myth. Men only got universal suffrage about 10 to 20 years before women did, depending where you are in the West. So like in the UK, men only got the universal right to vote 10 years before women did. That's not very long. Like, where is this huge, lengthy, history of women being oppressed when all men couldn't vote either, right? There was tons of restrictions. You had to be, in a lot of places, you had to be 27, you had to own land, you had to pay a tax, you had to pay a poll tax in order to vote. So if you were poor and you couldn't afford it, you couldn't vote. There was all kinds of restriction on men and their freedoms as well. And they just leave that out. They make it sound as though the men could just always do whatever they wanted and they enjoyed all this power. And it's not true.
Yeah, and I don't know. You guys might hate me for this, but there's just, I'm gonna be really honest. Like there's just sometimes, and I don't go to Walmart, but I've been inside of a couple of them, and I look around and I'm like, everyone gets to vote. I'm like, I don't know that I want everyone. I mean, I know that, but like sometimes I'm like, all of us, like everyone, like one of my biggest fears has always been that like entropy in society. It's like everyone always wants it cheaper than they want it. People always want it easier. They always want it freer. And I feel like that's the majority of humans, which makes the majority of humans easy to enslave and easy to manipulate. And I feel like voting, if everyone's voting, the majority of humans are gonna like constantly pull it. And so I mean, I don't mind hearing that there was a standard, like you had to perform to a standard to have a say in where, because if you can't govern your life, you can't govern your family, and you can't govern your weight,
right?
Then I don't know that I really want your opinion in where we're all going together.
Yeah. No, it's actually a great point that you're making because it's all about the narrative. It's about how this conversation always gets framed, and this conversation always gets framed as though, oh, if you couldn't vote, you were oppressed, you were systemically oppressed, and there was an evil white man somewhere that wanted to have his boot on your neck. And it's a little more complicated than that. And so, like, here's another fun fact for you guys. When they let women vote in referendums, right? A referendum is like a pre-vote. It's like, do we even want this thing on the ballot, right? So they'll do a referendum first to ask women if they were interested in having the right to vote. And in all the places that they did this, women barely came out to vote, and the ones who did overwhelmingly voted against it. For example, one of the largest referendums was in Massachusetts in the late 1800s, and they far and away, I think 4% of women voted that they wanted the right to vote. So 96% of the women who voted were against having the right to suffrage. And they had great reasons for this. I list them in my book. They said, if we also can vote, like it's going to cause strife between husbands and wives because women think differently. They have different interests. Our maternal instinct is going to cause us to make different choices than our husbands might make, and it's going to cause strife and division within the home, and that's bad. They said we don't want to be considered equal with men because then what if they want to draft us? What if they want to recruit us for jury duty and then we have to hear all the details of like grisly crimes and horrible things that we don't want to do. And we're busy. We've got a lot going on at home, especially back then. It was like women were in charge of the education of their children. They ran a lot of the community functions. They had tremendous influence without the vote. And they said, if we become just another political voting bloc, we're going to lose our moral high ground that we now enjoy as non-voters, because when we petition the government for something like they did with the 18th Amendment, does anybody remember what came before the 19th Amendment? It was the 18th Amendment, which was prohibition. Now, I'm not saying prohibition was good. I'm saying it's proof that women did not need the right to vote in order to have plenty of influence when it came to the governance of their communities, right? So if they went and petitioned for something and they said, we need cleaner water, we need more parks for our kids, we need better schools, the politicians tended to listen because they weren't a voting bloc and they had this like kind of this perceived impartiality, right, when it came to issues. Sure. And they didn't want to lose that. They had good reasons, and they had a lot of foresight. Like they said things like, well, we're going to end up working outside the home and we're not going to be at home with our kids. And like, they really kind of could see what would be coming if they had this supposed equality with men in politics, and they didn't want it. And so do you know what the women's suffrage groups did? These wonderful women who were fighting for other women, they barred us and banned us from voting any further in referendums. They stopped the referendums because they said women don't know what they want. They don't have all the information, and they're not educated enough on why they should be politically active. And so we're just going to make the decision for them. So where did this come from, right? This is what people ask. Well, Rachel, if women didn't want this liberation, and we should ask ourselves, liberation from what? From whom exactly? If women don't want the liberation, how did we get it, right? And the way we got it is because at this time, during the progressive era, we had a bunch of really wealthy industrialists who were running everything. It was like the Rockefellers, the Vanderbilts, the Ford family, all these big golden age entrepreneurs who were incredibly wealthy. Like we'd never seen that type of new wealth in the new world before. And they had factories and manufacturing and all these huge, they're like investing in all this manufacturing infrastructure at the time, and they wanted more cheap labor. They couldn't get enough immigrants fast enough, and there wasn't enough child labor, right? So they thought if we can get women in the workforce, we can pay them a nice low wage, we can tax their income, which they're about to pass the income tax. So there's a reason why the 19th Amendment, the income tax, and the Federal Reserve Act all got passed right around the same time. And I'll actually also add to that compulsory education, like mandatory public schools. This was like a package deal. It was a package deal to re-engineer society so that they had plenty of good little worker bees to fill their factories, to build all their stuff, to keep making them wealthy, and to indoctrinate the kids in school while mom and dad are at work in the factory, and to tax 2 people in the home instead of just 1. And here's the other big one, the progressive agenda with its, huge welfare state, with open borders, with, world policing, this future that these progressivists had envisioned for like a giant nanny state and a world government. You would have never passed that if only men can vote. And you can look back at the last 100 years of voting and see that without the women's vote, you would not have all this mass immigration, all these forever wars, the NSA, the TSA, the huge amount of spending that we have on welfare. And if you look at out of wedlock births, from 1960 to now, and you look at welfare spending from 1960 to now, they go up on a graph like this, whoop, right in lockstep with each other. So what this achieved was we replaced fathers in the home with the government. Yeah. And we told women that the person that's most dangerous to you, and I just had a debate with someone the other night who said this to me, that the most dangerous person for a woman is her husband. That he's going to be the person who's most likely to hurt her or harm her. And there's a piece on my Substack that goes over 45 years of government data in the largest collections that they have, which is called the National Incident Study. And it's all types of reporting on any type of maltreatment and abuse. And what this shows is that the safest place for women and children by a factor of 8 to 12 times is with the biological father married in the home. Every other type of living situation is orders of magnitude more dangerous for both women and children. So what we've got here, right? What we've got is this massive project to take society as it had existed for all of human history and flip it upside down and invert it, tell women that they're the boss, say the man is dangerous and bad and violent and abusive, you need to get rid of him. If you're unhappy, the first thing you need to do is get rid of your husband. The kids are resilient and they'll get over it and it'll all be fine, right? Wrong. And that's not, I mean, if you look at the data, that's not true. It's not true. And the whole last chapter of my book is just a ton of statistics proving that this is the case, that this has made women and children more vulnerable, not less vulnerable, and that it's actually made women very unhappy.
Yeah. Have you looked at the statistics around kids being raised with just their parent, their father versus the wife? What have you found there?
Yeah, so by far, like I said, by far the best situation for kids is with both married biological parents. Right. That situation has the least amount of like abuse of all types, like emotional, physical, sexual abuse, any type of abuse. It produces the most stable kids with the lowest risk of all the negative outcomes, less likely to end up in juvie, less likely to end up homeless, less likely to end up with addiction, less likely to have ADD, ADHD, or any other type of learning problems in school. And then the next safest is with dad.
Yeah.
Like if you're going to have a single parent, single dads have a very close outcome to both married biological parents.
Mhm.
And then the next one would be just mom. And then the worst situation for children is with mom and whoever the new partner is, whether it's a man or a woman. Like lesbian relationships have a very, very high incidence of domestic violence. And then mom plus the boyfriend is also tends to be much more dangerous for kids. And I think the reason for that is if you were a bad guy, if you are a predator, you're going to look for single moms because easy access to kids, right? So, I mean, this seems very intuitive, and it's like, how did we forget these things and how did we just go along with this agenda? But the propaganda was so powerful. Like I said, you had in the 60s, you had them firing off all kinds of fake statistics, which they still do now. They'll say things like, oh, 1 in 3 women on college campuses experiences SA. I'll just say that in case this goes on YouTube or something, but assault, right? That statistic includes things like being catcalled or having a drunk hookup and regretting it the next day. They're very dishonest when they're collecting this data and they put out these talking points. Basically, what I do as my side job now is investigate these claims and find out if they're true. And almost every time I find that they're fluffing it up to make it seem much worse than it is. They're trying to make the data fit the picture that they want to paint, that your husband is going to hold you back and he's going to hurt you, right? And so you need to be strong and independent and have your own money. And if you're depressed or if you're feeling unfulfilled, it must be the marriage. Just get out of there and go find yourself, girl. You know, like that kind of stuff.
I do a lot in the self-defense, personal protection realm. And I actually have a passion for teaching women self-defense, but not from the frame that I think it's very frequently, which is like, learn how to fight and then you can beat up dudes. Like, I really don't think that's the case at all. To be completely honest. But what I do find, but there are ways for women to physically protect themselves. But like the beginning of the course, in my opinion, is simply, the biggest thing when it comes to personal protection and self-defense for women is honestly like wisdom. It's really wisdom. And in a lot of cases, I don't want to get crazy here, but it's listening to the men in your lives. Like every woman I know has been sexually assaulted. And all those stories have to do with going out from underneath the covering of your parents or not listening to whatever man's in your life, putting yourself in a situation where you shouldn't have been in the first place. And it's a lack of discernment and wisdom. And it ends up with opening a door and creating a situation where you can be taken advantage of. And and I believe that that's like really the first step is like teaching our daughters, the precepts and values and operating at a high value level, which is going to cause you not to put, hey, sorry, Jeff, I know we've been friends since 3rd grade, but I'm not alone with dudes, like I just not know you can't get me right home. Okay. I'm going to stay in the girls will be out in a minute and I'm going to go ahead and get a ride home with them. Like, and that's, I think, the foundation of it. And there are men in your life, we're hunters, and hunters recognize hunters very quickly. And so when you have that guy over and your dad and your brothers are like, I don't know about that one. Like there's something there because we all speak the same language. We all use the same tools. We can recognize it. But yeah.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, they've interviewed like child predators or rapists in prison and done psychological profiling on them. And they all say that when they're picking victims, they look for women who do not have either a strong dad or a strong husband, brother, somebody around them. They look for someone who's unprotected. And what we did with liberating women, especially the sexual liberation stuff, like telling girls, like I was told, that it's a rite of passage to go off to college, binge drink on the weekends, go to all the parties, have your hot girl summer. This is like, it's like giving them the advice that could put them at the most risk. And what feminists will say is, well, just teach men not to do that. And it's like the vast majority of men do not. We're talking about like less than 1% of men who tend to be like these violent offenders. It's a very small number. Most men aren't going to do that to you. But the ones who are all in certain places, right? And they're all in certain situations. And I actually am a firearms instructor, and I teach women concealed carry and personal protection in the home and basic pistol shooting for this reason. I've been a victim of this kind of thing myself.
Yep.
However, I was able to walk away from that situation realizing it's not all men. It's a very small minority of men, and the rest of the men hate those guys and want to protect you. They want to protect you from that guy. And so, like, if you listen to dad and if you have like good, strong male influences in your life that you listen to, you're a lot less likely to be put at risk. But I mean, it kind of makes this bigger point of how we've torn apart society and how the promises that were made to women that feminism is going to make them safer has not made them safer. There's been 2 huge surveys done in the last 20 years on this. The first one it came out in 2008, and it was called The Paradox of Female Happiness. And this was a big survey they did of thousands of women. And they asked them about like their happiness and satisfaction levels in their lives on a number of metrics. And the age range went back to women who were like, alive in the early 70s, right before the women's liberation stuff really took hold. And what they found is that to the extent women became more liberated and, weren't married, were working outside the home, like all the sexual liberation stuff, those women reported less happiness. Right. And the further you went back away from women's liberation, the happier that women were. Mm-hmm. And it caused this huge kerfuffle. I remember when this came out, actually, I remember it being reported on the news and people were very upset about it. So they did a follow-up study several years later, and they included women from other countries. They went all around the world and did this. They went to Asian countries, Muslim countries, all over, and did the same kind of survey, and they expanded it to include more like mental health metrics and other health metrics, things like alcoholism and stuff like that. And what the authors of the study found, and this is in that same piece I was telling you about on my Substack, they said that everywhere in every culture across time, women tend to be less happy than men. And I think this is just a product of our hormonal cycle being, a monthly cycle and being so up and down. And as a woman who's experienced pregnancy and postpartum and all of the female things, and now I'm in my mid-40s, so I'm getting towards menopause, right? So I've been through this whole gamut of crazy hormonal stuff, and men don't have that. Men have a 24-hour cycle, and it's just it's very even. And they tend to just not have these wild ups and downs and like prolonged periods like we do. Like any woman who's had a baby will tell you, postpartum hormones take about a year to level out. And even if you're nursing and stuff, it can take longer. And so it's like, there's reasons for these things, like the whole women not having a bank account. You've heard this probably, that women couldn't have a bank account, women couldn't have a credit card until the 70s. Do they ever ask why? They never ask why. So I asked why. And the reason why is because only men were allowed to be legally held liable for debt or support of the family up until like the 70s, 80s, when all the divorce laws and everything started to change. So it wasn't that women couldn't use credit. So if I was a wife in 1930, my husband could have an account at the local department store, a credit account, and I could go use it, but only he could be responsible for having to pay it. So they couldn't take me to court and sue me to pay the debts because that's the man's job. So I'm like, that's a pretty good deal for us. I feel like that's a pretty good deal for us, especially now. Women hold the majority of college debt in this country, and we're on par with men for consumer debt. And we have more mortgage debt than men do now. So as the people who have the babies, why would you want that for your society? Like, how does that make sense to shackle women with that burden and then expect them to have kids? Which is why the average woman only has 1.5 children now. And in the year 1800, that number was 7. The average woman had 7 kids in 1800. Now, of course, there was higher infant mortality. A lot of the kids, didn't make it and things like that. But even at the turn of the 20th century, it was like 4 or 5 kids per woman, and it's just dropped off a cliff since we started pushing women into college and career. And then, of course, you've got hormonal birth control now.
Right.
So we're now looking at like a population collapse all over the world. It's nuts.
That's massive. That's
Yeah.
and kind of scary. What about all right, I want to get into this occult feminism.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
We got like 20 minutes. I want to get into occult feminism. Then I want to get into like what can dudes do if they're married to one of these women, or they see, their daughters starting to be like, you ain't in charge of me, Dad. I'm not wearing a shirt today, whatever it is. I don't know.
You can't tell me what to do.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So the occult thing, when I started researching the book, I did 2.5 years of really dedicated research to this because number one, I knew that the picture I was seeing painted something completely different than what the dominant narrative is. And if you're going to go against the dominant narrative, you had better have your facts straight. You had better be sure you know what you're talking about, and you had better be ready for a lot of scrutiny and criticism. So I knew I had to be very careful and not sensationalize my position and make sure that I had all the evidence and that I was presenting a factual picture here for people, because that was my goal. It wasn't because I have like some agenda, like I don't want the women to work. It's really not that at all. It's not that. It's just for me, it was more like I'm fighting for moms and moms who care about their children and their families, and I don't want us being slandered and called things like baby factories. Like the amount of women who would say things to me like, oh, it's such a shame you never did anything with your life, Rachel. You're so talented. You're so smart. It's such a shame you wasted all your talents on just popping out babies, right?
Come on.
This is like the rhetoric that's been around for a while now. And I think it's like really unfair and disgusting. So it was more about like, correcting that rather than like me pushing an agenda. I want to enslave the women and put them back in the kitchen. It's really not that. So I did my due diligence with all the research, and I thought that the book was going to be more about like the funding of the 19th Amendment and those progressive industrialists I was telling you about and how they're the ones that pushed women out of the home. And it definitely goes over all of that. But as I'm profiling all these prominent first wave suffragists from Mary Wollstonecraft in the 1770s all the way through to the 1920s, 1960s even. I'm looking at the leaders, the female leaders of this movement, and I'm getting their whole life story and what were their beliefs and what was their worldview, because I wanted to understand them. And I kept finding over and over that so many of them were involved in occult type practices, things like spirit mediumship, automatic writing, tarot card reading, some cases open Luciferianism, like open Satanism. Yeah. There's a really huge book that's a PhD thesis by a guy, a Scandinavian professor, and it's called Satanic Feminism. You can buy it on Amazon. The author's name is Per Faxneld. And he is an actual Satanist himself, but he's actually really objective in his study. And he said that in the 19th century, Lucifer was openly the like mascot or the hero of women's liberation. They saw Lucifer as the good guy. They saw Christ as the bad guy. God, the God of the Old Testament, as the bad guy who wanted to keep you from knowledge of sex and liberation. And it was actually Lucifer, the light bringer, who is on us women's side, right? This was, again, you never hear this when you see Susan B. Anthony on a postage stamp or a coin. You don't know that her best friend, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, and a couple dozen of her friends rewrote the Bible from a feminist perspective. They like actually went through the whole Bible and wrote a commentary on each chapter of the Bible and turned it into a female liberation thing and had like this Luciferian Gnostic reading of the Bible. You can buy that to this day if you go on Amazon. It's called The Woman's Bible, right?
I would never make it.
In this group of women who wrote this were 3 female pastors. So if you think female pastors are new, now this was written in 1895, and there were 3 lady pastors, one of whom was an open lesbian who lived with her wife, girlfriend, whatever you want to call it. So this stuff isn't new, you guys. It's just that they wrote all this out of the history books because it makes women's liberation look pretty sus and kind of not so whitewashed and not so angelic and pure and altruistic, right? And in the foreword to the book, Elizabeth Cady Stanton herself says she doesn't really believe in the Bible. She doesn't believe any of the stuff that's in it. She thinks it was made up by men for the express purpose of oppressing women. But because at this time the Bible was so popular and so many people were Christian, she said, I'll never be able to get rid of the Bible. If I thought I could wipe the Bible and all of the Mosaic law off the face of the earth, I would, but I can't. So I'm going to subvert it instead, and I'm going to twist it and make up my own version and sell it to women. Not kidding. Like, that's literally what she says right in the foreword to the book.
Not bad.
So there was a very strong anti-Christian sentiment. You can also look at people like Matilda Joslyn Gage. She wrote a book called Woman, Church, and State in the 1890s about how she felt the church and the state were the primary oppressors of women, and that if they could change that and get rid of the influence of the church, that women would actually rule things. And that's where you get a lot of this idea that like Native American tribes, were matriarchal, which actually isn't true. That's another myth. It's another lie. It's not that there aren't some tribes that have some matrilineal characteristics, but the women were like never in charge of like war and governance and things like that. But they'll try to make it sound that way to sell you on it. So I just found over and over that these women were into like spiritualism, which was hugely popular. There's a whole chapter in the book on like the whole religious milieu of this time period in America and how we had lots of crazy cults, lots of really wild takes on Christianity. You had things like Shakers, Quakers, Seventh-day Adventists, Mormons, and tons of other like utopian cults that often had communism as like a main theme in them. This was getting popular at the time. So most of the women who were involved in first wave suffrage, most were into like anti-Christian types of what we would literally call like witchcraft, spiritualism, theosophy was another huge influence. So it was a really strong anti-Christian sentiment because Christianity is a patriarchal religion. Right. It's a rebellion against God the Father, and it's a rebellion against the hierarchy that God created, where man is the head of the home and the head of the church, and women have this supporting role where they're trying to help. Right. We're helpmeets. That's our role. And they didn't like that. They wanted to get rid of that. So that's what they did.
Yeah. And it makes perfect sense. I mean, it goes back to the Garden of Eden, and when Satan approached Eve and was like, yo, what's up? Check it out. Did God really
exactly
say, And it takes that leadership and it puts it on its head, and God comes back and is like, yo, Adam, he didn't ask for Eve. He was like, hey, Adam, where you at, dog? Like, what happened?
Yes.
And Adam has to come up and answer. And then Adam, of course, he is maybe one of those happy wife, happy life guys. But I cut Adam some slack because the first time he ever seen a naked woman, he didn't really stand a chance. With her over God, he saw her and he ate the fruit. Anyways, so this is super interesting. And I love kind of getting to the roots of a thing. For me, it's just been really painful just to watch it happened. I mean, even when like R&B came out, I remember being like listening to the lyrics and being like, this is pathetic. Like these guys, for whatever reason, I think because of my upbringing and being under such a fem dominant environment, I had like built-in resistance to where I was like, I'm not letting that happen to me again. And it actually, that little way I dealt with trauma kind of helped me kind of like see through a lot of it, that and the grace of God, But if you think of most men, raised by women because it's a broken home, and then you get to school and your teacher's in charge of you, she's probably a female and you're still looking for female affirmation and acceptance. And then you get out into the dating circuit. So you kind of try to carry that in there, and then you just get wrecked because it's not masculine, And so it's interesting. What do you think? Because I know I'm trying to bump my next appointment so I can get a little bit more time. But what do you think about, if guys are, seeing these attributes, this stuff's starting to take hold in their homes, or if maybe they're even in a home where it has taken hold. I mean, I know there's some tough answers, Do you have any thoughts on how to deconstruct that type of social engineering because it's everywhere. They just came out with the new Predator. They turned Wolverine into a little girl. The last Terminator, they're like, come with me if you want to live. And it's like a little girl saving Terminator. They turned the new Predator into a female Predator. John Wick's now a chick flick. There's nowhere to go. There's nowhere to run, gents. You know?
It's so bad. They ruin everything. They really ruin everything.
I'm waiting for the new Rambo to come out and it's going to be like, yeah, like a girl Rambo. Like, anyways, I can't deal with it. Anyways.
It's so true. And it's funny because a lot of the women have grown up with this and they think it's real. Like, this is why you see girls going to Antifa protests and like trying to kick the shit out of like big ass patriot dudes in their flip flops and their leggings. And then they get knocked out and they have no idea what happened. Right. I mean,
it's a delusion.
Everybody might know that my husband is like a regular on the Whatever podcast, and I've been on there a few times myself. And the amount of women we have encountered that when you just ask them, who's stronger on average, men or women, they will not admit that it's men. They will do the most crazy mental gymnastics to act like, well, it could be some women. Some women are stronger. I can deadlift more than this guy over here can. And it's like, it's so insane, the programming and the brainwashing. So this is the answer to your question is like, men have a serious uphill battle. And it's why we need shows like yours and books like my book to kind of bring the sanity back, because it's amazing how good brainwashing works. It's amazing how great the propaganda is, and everything in the culture tells you. I mean, look at Beyonce and Taylor Swift. Think of a female pop star of any kind who is not like a feminist boss babe as her whole image. Katy Perry, same thing. The whole culture is saturated with this. Every movie, every TV show, every song that, you know, is the most popular song is going to have a theme of women's liberation, and I can do what boys can do, and I can do it better, and I don't need a man, and I'm going to do it all myself. And so it's extremely tough to find a woman who doesn't have this mindset, because she doesn't even probably know that she has it. I was this way. Like, I would never say I was like a really tough feminist or anything like that. It's just that I grew up in a culture that was constantly telling me I should do what the men are doing. I should be like the boys. I should beat them at what they're doing. And I kind of grew up a tomboy, so I had a lot of like masculine interests, like, you know, outdoor stuff, hunting, shooting. I love lifting weights. I've been lifting for 20 years now. But I think something about being a tomboy helped me understand that even though I like doing these things, I cannot do them like the boys. There's a reason that there's women's weightlifting categories and men's weightlifting categories, right? No matter how great I train, my husband, who does not go to the gym regularly, can just walk up and pick up my deadlift like it's nothing. He doesn't care. And say, I mean, it's the same thing with guns. Like, even with guns, which are the great equalizer and the best chance you have as a woman, most of my female students, more than half, they don't have the hand strength to load a spring-loaded magazine for an automatic pistol or to work the action on an automatic pistol. They just don't have the hand strength. And a lot of them, I have to give them like a 22 revolver or something that they can reliably use, because they can't load it, unload it, fix it if there's a jam, right? So there's just these inherent biological differences that women have been convinced don't exist and are just mean. You're mean if you say that men are stronger. And so when men try to date, they're facing this uphill battle, because if you want a woman who is going to have your babies and raise them herself, that's tough to find, because even the more conservative women, even the good women, are thoroughly convinced that they must work, that you know, and they've all gone to college. So it's like, well, I didn't get $40,000 in college debt and go to school until I was 23 to just flip a switch and stay at home. You know, that I spent my whole first 23, 25 years of my life preparing for my career. And so they find it really difficult to switch over to the mindset of staying home, raising kids. It's tough. It's really hard, because it's not that there aren't good women out there. It's just that they've all been told from the time they're born that they have to compete in a man's world and they have to be career women, and that it's dangerous to rely on your husband to support you, and that it's dangerous to trust him and to trust his leadership, and that you have to fight him for dominance and you have to compete, and that he needs to ask your permission for things, and that if he's not acting like a woman in the relationship, that he's abusive, right?
And he
Like,
doesn't value
how many women do you know of? Like, how many women do you talk to that think every boyfriend they've ever had was a narcissist and was emotionally abusive, right? Oh, he was emotionally abusive. And it usually comes down to like, oh, he wouldn't let me wear that slutty outfit to the club with my friends, or he told me I couldn't spend, this outrageous amount on,
he's
a handbag or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this has been framed to be abuse. So I guess my best, I don't know if I have advice other than I would say, look for this, because you're not going to find a unicorn. You're not going to find some woman who was just born like this perfect unicorn who wants male leadership. Practically doesn't exist. Even
Right.
I had to
Read.
I had to learn these things. I had to learn to be a good wife. So if you can find a woman who is open to correction, who can take like constructive criticism, that's the biggest thing. If you are dating a girl and you say to her, look, when you threw that remote control at me, or when you made fun of me in front of all of your friends to get a laugh, that was bullshit. I don't like that. And I'm not going to put up with that kind of behavior. If she's even just receptive to it, if she will even take that kind of correction, that's probably your best bet, because that's a woman that you can work with and you can reason with.
Yeah.
And that's probably the best thing to look for, I would say.
I 100% agree with you. I think that's the best thing to look for. I think one of the biggest things that, at least from where I'm sitting, that I see that's so tragic is it's almost like when women have been trained to operate in a masculine manner. Like, I don't like to say when they're in their masculine, because they don't have masculinity. Masculinity is physicality, and you can't really you can't really
Can't really fake it.
Exactly. It's like, oh, look at you. But like when they are trying to operate, it's like fire. Like, everyone thinks fire is so powerful and they want firepower, and it's all this. It's like water is just as probably possibly even more powerful, but no one's like intrigued by water right now. They just all want to be fire. So it's like women, when they're in that feminine energy and they're gentle and they're vulnerable, because personally, I believe that femininity is like the art of vulnerability. It's like you're when you understand influence from a place of vulnerability, you really start to like understand how you can control, you can influence. I don't want to use the word control, but you can influence so powerfully. Whereas me, I'm 240-pound black dude. I've been trained to be dangerous my entire life. I don't have to listen to nobody. If I don't, really, most guys, and the guys that I do have to listen to, I instantly just listen to them. I'm like, yeah, I get it. You're better than me. You're bigger than me. I get it. What do you need? How can I help? And this whole, and I don't want to use a word that's too crazy, but like this art of submission. And when you're a female and you come with this, like, look, like, I'm depending on you and I'm asking for your help and I'm learning from you. You have so much influence. And I believe that we're equal in value, just different in function, equal in glory, different in function. We're both different sides to the face of God's image. He created us both in his image.
Yes.
But we have these different functions that have different levels of responsibility. Like, if cops come to my door right now and knock on the door, I don't have to listen to them necessarily, because they're like, I'm probably more dangerous than they are. But the reality is, if they're submitted to authority, if they don't do anything that they shouldn't be doing on my property, they have the ability to bring a whole battalion of guys here and subdue me, right? And so what I've found is there's like an art to that that's very feminine and very powerful. If my wife wants to influence me and she's operating in that, I will give her a blood transfusion, right? And I feel like the biggest things, and that's what I'm doing. That's what every day, going to work and doing all these things to provide and protect, you're giving a blood transfusion of your life to your people every single day. And so I find that, like, I watch the way that women move sometimes, and it's like, wow, like, you could elicit a response from me that would make me willing to give my life for you, or you can challenge me on grounds of masculinity that you don't have. You don't have the pedigree, you don't have the physicality, and you don't probably have that you don't have what I naturally would follow in those realms. And so it's like, and then it breaks my heart, because these women don't get the things they want and need. Like, they want you to treat them like women, and it's like, I want to treat you like a woman, but you're over here challenging me like a man. And I want you to feel special and like I care about your, like you and all this stuff. But if you challenge me on the grounds of a man, I have to almost be willing to die to protect that. It's my honor, So it made the relations so competitive and
Yeah.
toxic and I think that's like one of the massive things. But what you said, I think you 100% nailed it. That feedback thing is massive. You know, like if they can take constructive feedback, you're heading in the right direction. I also
Yeah.
looking at their parental relationships, like watching the way their parents operate can give
Yeah.
some understanding of what their internal world really looks like. And then I think, honestly, you know, not to be cliche, but finding a woman, you know, I was thinking about this morning, a person like God has to be the superior, because the only thing that can keep me in check is my fear of God and wanting to emulate that for people in my life and my wife, and having a woman that wants also is accountable to God is massive, because then she has a superior that if she doesn't have the fear of God, man, you got your work cut out for you.
Yeah.
My leadership is really dictated by my relationship with God. Like the amount of patience that he is showing me, the amount of long suffering, the amount of, hey, Byron, we're going to go do this. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I'm scared. And he's like, you're scared again, bro? We've done so many, like, what are we doing right now? You know, the amount of that leadership. And then when you're interacting with your wife, and you know, the Bible talks about how she's the weaker vessel and how you need to deal with her in understanding. And I just find that my relationship with God, the way he is with me, informs the way that I need to be with my wife. And that's really the only thing that works. And if I get
Yeah.
into my flesh and all my good ideas about how I think it should be, I generally make some mistake somewhere in there and complicate the thing, you know. But I think to make it a little more succinct for guys, I think really trying to emulate the level of care and the level of gentleness that you see from the proximity you have in your relationship with your father will help you achieve the influence, because she's going to need to feel safe, and she's also going to need strong leadership, and that's what you're going to get
Yeah.
from them, and that's what you're going to have to stand in, and it's probably going to be it's going to be rough, but if you can operate in love and make sure she feels safe while also giving that strong leadership over time, maybe that can turn the tide. But you might
Yeah. Well, I
have.
remember my light bulb moment for myself when I realized my pattern of behavior in relationships and where it was going wrong for me. I remember having this huge fight with my now husband, like early on, and I'm in the shower and I'm thinking about it, and I'm thinking about the two relationships I had before him and how they failed in kind of the same way that I felt like this was failing. And I remember all of a sudden it was like this thought came into my head of like, if I want a man who's not a child, that I don't have to be his mother, right? If I want this man who's responsible and he's going to lead in the right direction and he's going to, do all the responsible man things I want him to do, I cannot be stepping on his dick all the time. Excuse my language, but
Right.
I cannot be telling him how to do that and how he needs to do it and when to do it and what to do. Like, it's gonna take trust. And us women have been so deeply programmed to never trust men and to second guess everything the man does. And no matter, it doesn't matter what the man is trying to do. And you see this all the time with divorces, right? The woman will say, well, you need to work more because we need a bigger house and I'd like to take a vacation and we need a second vehicle. So you have to work more. You have to make more money. So the guy goes, okay. So he starts doing 60, 70 hours a week at work. He's working his ass off. And then what does the wife do? She goes, well, now you're working too much and I don't feel like I'm getting enough attention and I feel like you're neglecting me and we need more date nights. And it's like it's like we've been taught to only criticize, to only look for any place the guy might be falling short rather than, and this is what changed it for me. I took this huge leap of faith and I was like, what if I just treat my husband like he's already the leader that I'm envisioning? He's already this great husband that I want. What if I just treat him like he's already that guy? And the change within a couple of weeks in our relationship was like night and day. It was like I found a magic key to marriage or something, right?
Yeah.
Where
Cheat codes.
when I shifted my attitude to like, he needs my support, to work this hard. He needs my support to fulfill his potential and become this awesome guy that I know he is. And so I'm just going to act like that. I'm going to never give him any grief. I'm going to hold my tongue with criticisms. I'm going to look for the good that he's doing. I'm going to just whatever he thinks he needs to do to be that guy, I'm going to support it 100%, regardless of this programming in the back of my head that's telling me to pick at him and poke holes in what he's doing. And it was a little hard, honestly, to undo it that first week or two. But when I shifted that, it was like he magically became like a better version of himself almost right away. And I became a better wife and mom and version of myself. And I was happier. And it was like, ladies, I'm telling you, let that control go. Let that shit go. It is the hugest relief. You'll feel like there's 2,000 pounds of weight lifted off your shoulders when you just stop doing that. Stop, trying to fight for the control and tell him, well, I want you to do this, but I want you to do it my way. And this isn't good enough. And you have to put more energy in over here. If you stop trying to micromanage and control your man, and you just be supportive and say, whatever you think is the best way, that's what we're going to do. Just watch the change, okay? And you'll know right away if you got a good guy or not. Because if he's a schlub, that's gonna show itself right away too. So that's really the magic key as a woman is, support his leadership and support his masculinity and encourage all those things rather than tear it down and pick it apart. And it's like, it's my best advice for women, right? It's like, you're going to get the good relationship you want that way. You're never going to get it if you're just always there telling him what he needs to do better and what he's not doing enough of, and that he needs to do it different. That'll never work. You'll never get the guy you want that way.
And I think what you're really talking about is the art of influence. It's like the art of influence. It's like, how do you bring something out, bring the best out in someone? And the art of influence, especially from the feminine, that's like your guys's. I think that's really your guys's bread and butter, that support and influence. And doing it from a non-competitive stance, but doing it from an encouraging stance, it's really a superpower. You look at Esther, you look at these different females in the Bible, you look at Ruth and Naomi, like it's not overt. The masculine is overt, but it's this subversive, beautiful, gentle art. And it is extremely powerful. And I really, what makes me so sad about what I see in the programming is they try to condition women to think that that's second or not powerful or not like this superpower. And when it's the only way the Holy Spirit's really ever dealt with me, in my life, is he's like, hey man, you need to go do this. And he's a gentle spirit. And I make a mistake and I have like a safe place to run, that's not filled with condemnation and all this other stuff. And it keeps me feeling safe and close and intimate with them, and on the masculine side, it's very interesting. One of the biggest lessons that I've been learning lately is like, I've done a lot of work on myself. I've read over 300 self-help books. I got a master's in psychology, just got an honorary doctorate for Christian business and leadership and stuff. So I can solve problems pretty quick in my head, but really understanding how to make my wife feel safe so that I can effectively influence, and so that I can effectively, obviously she's going to follow me, but like, I want her to also recognize the honor in her position as I do that. And that's something that God does with me, which is so really kind of cool as I'm trying to get downrange with him. He helps me with my weaknesses and he still makes me do the hard thing, and he works and he comes down to my level and works with me while I try to become who he's created me to be. And the whole thing is becoming. And then I find with my wife, like so much of it is like, I'm doing everything I can to influence the best out of her so that we can arrive at the finish line the best. And she's operating in that feminine and it's bringing the best out of me. So it's like super, totally, really cyclical.
Yeah.
Even though
so
today,
on that,
Byron, what'd you do with
on
her?
that? I'm an Orthodox Christian, and in our church, we see marriage as a sacrament and a path to salvation. So when you get married in the Orthodox Church, it's literally forever. And you as spouses are co-responsible for each other's salvation. So it is much more than just like a roommate agreement or a way to split the bills and raise the kids. It's I'm literally responsible for helping my husband get to the kingdom and vice versa. And what women do because of this feminist programming is we shoot ourselves in the foot. And out of fear, because we've been trained to be scared, is we cut our husbands and boyfriends off at the knees. We cut our men off at the knees because we're afraid that if they achieve their full potential, if they become this best version of themselves and they're really successful, there's fear in what that means. Like, what if he doesn't have time for me? What if I'm not important to him anymore because he's got all these other people demanding his time? And I will say, like, my husband's a very successful guy, and that does kind of happen. And what women always think they want the alpha guy, right? I want the alpha man. I want the CEO. I want the successful rapper. I want the successful basketball player. I want the hot actor. And it's like, what you need to realize is that those men are extremely busy.
Yep.
They have demands on their time from everyone around them. And they don't always have a ton that they can just devote to you. And so you have to ask yourself, like, do you really want that? Because I think most women are actually happier with a guy who works his job. Yeah. He's a responsible guy. He pays the bills. He takes care of the yard on the weekends, and he's a good dad. And he's never going to be famous. He's never going to be 6 foot, 6-pack, 6 figures. But that guy is going to have more time and attention for you. So it's like, if your husband, if you're supporting him and he becomes wildly successful, it doesn't mean you don't matter, and it doesn't mean he won't make time for what's important. Of course they do. But you can't have this expectation that you're the center of his world and everything revolves around you, because if the man does that, if he makes you the center of his world, you will suddenly find yourself a lot less attracted, a lot less interested, more bored. And, so we have to understand our own psychology and how it works against us sometimes and how it kind of defeats us in relationships. Yeah. You have to be a little bit brave, and it's a little bit of like, it feels like doing one of those trust falls where you're falling backwards and hoping that you have to trust his leadership, because here's the thing. If I could tell women one thing, what's best for him is what's best for you.
Get him.
Okay. So if he's happy and healthy and thriving and successful, and men need a mission. My husband says this all the time. Men need a mission. Yeah. And if he's successful in his mission, if he's working towards his goal and he's feeling like he's making progress and he's doing well, you're going to be doing well. He's going to take care of you. He's going to be happy. You're going to be happy. Yep. It will never make you happy to cut him off at the knees or to hold him back or to restrain him out of your fear that he's going to dump you for someone hotter or not have enough time for you or feel like he's in a different league than you now. Because men don't look at us that way. Men aren't like, well, I'm a powerful CEO now, and what are you doing? You're just the mother of my children staying home raising the... Men don't think that way. Yeah, right. They don't want a boss babe to be on par with them and stuff. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I think we as women we have the wrong mindset, and we think of stuff wrong, and we let our own psychology and our own fears really work against us in relationships. And if you can overcome that, I'm telling you, it's like a whole new world opens up.
Yeah, no, I think you nailed it when you were talking about operating from faith rather than fear, and sacrament of really helping the other person with their salvation, which essentially means you need to be emulating the Spirit of God, Spirit of Christ in that relationship as often as possible. And there's going to be a route, and it's going to require a death. For me, a lot of times it's like, look, I can solve this problem in 2 seconds. I already know what the answer is. And she's like, this is how I feel about it. And I'm like, I've got to listen to your feelings. When do we have to do this feelings thing? You know what I mean? And so for me, that's my struggle, but then the Holy Spirit is like, look, bro, I deal with your stupid feelings all the time, homie. You know what I mean? He's like, bro, you were scared 2 minutes ago. How come we've done so much together? I still got to deal with this with you all the time. You were doing stupid things yesterday. We had to forgive you about. So he's constantly using, and so it's such a good example. And so if I'm operating from this place of compassion and operating from this place of making sure the other person feels significant, operating from total responsibility, everything is my fault, my responsibility, and operating from what really Christ, if you actually read what he did and read, he wasn't a nice guy. He was a good man. When you're operating from those places, and I'm emulating that, and then she's looking at me and she's got to make a choice. Do I superimpose my opinion here? Do I try to dominate? Do I try to take control because I'm afraid? Or do I just say, look, there's a structure here that I need to adhere to in order to get the results that God has for me in my relationship? And it's going to take a death. It might take an ego death. It might take some trust, but you have to operate from faith going this direction and even here with your partner. And then you get the really good results out of it.
Yes.
I get the really good results out of her by slowing down and trying to make sure that I value that and make it significant, and then I make my decision. She gets the good results out of being like, hey, ultimately it's his responsibility. I'm going to give my 2 cents, and we're going to roll. But I'm following him because God's going to call him to account. And it turns into this beautiful thing.
Yeah, that's the key. What you just said is the key. It's like, if you as a woman want your husband to bear this ultimate responsibility, like you said, ultimately everything's my responsibility. Like the buck stops with me. It's all on my shoulders. I think that we as women take for granted how hard a life that is for men. It's a hard life that men have, because here's what it's like being a man. When you're growing up as a little boy, nobody cares about your feelings. Nobody cares. And people will say, oh, we just need to change this. But it's not a changeable thing, because the male hierarchy requires this, right? It requires men to go through trial by fire. They have to prove their worth. They have to produce something of value in order to be seen as worthwhile in this world. Whereas girls, we have a totally different experience. We are cute and adorable. Everybody wants to spoil us when we're little because we're adorable, sweet, little, cute little girls. Everyone wants to protect you. Then you hit sexual maturity, and everyone all the men want to sleep with you. So everybody's, they'll pay for your dinner. They'll help you if your tire's flat on the side of the road. They open the door for you. And what women have come to expect is they want all those privileges, but they want to take away men's power and share in the power too. And that's not equality, ladies. Equality is not having all the power and authority and all the privilege and just telling men that there are slaves and need to build this whole technologically advanced world for us that allows us to think that we're equal with them and that we can do everything that they can do. Because I'm telling you, when the power goes out, nobody's a feminist. Okay?
Yeah, exactly.
Nobody's a feminist. We just had 10 tornadoes rip through Michigan last Thursday. My power was out for 2.5 days. There were down trees and power lines everywhere. It was a pretty dangerous situation around here. And it's like, I didn't see the women coming out and, clearing the trees out of the road and putting the power lines back up and, rescuing people that were trapped inside of their home with a tree down on their house, right?
Oh, gosh.
That was the men doing that. Okay, ladies, that's the men rescuing people from floodwaters and fires and all that sort of stuff. So you cannot expect men to bear ultimate responsibility, build the whole world for you, and then also be like, but I want to be in charge, right? So you have to pick one. If you want a weak beta male who's going to let you step on his neck, tell him what to do, you can find that. There are simps out there, and there's plenty of them who will just do whatever you want, and they'll acquiesce to your wishes because they'll put you on a pedestal, but you're going to hate him. You're going to resent him. He's going to disgust you. You're not going to be attracted to him either. So it's like, if you want this guy who is this dream guy that most of you describe, you can't also step all over him, cut him off at the knees, second guess everything he does, start making all kinds of demands. You really have to pick one. You have to decide what you want. And if you want a guy who you can really trust in to take care of you, to handle business, to be responsible, to achieve great things in life and lead not just you and your kids, but maybe your grandkids, you want a legacy and you want a man who's worthy of this legacy, then you got to let him be that. You've got to support that, and you can't just be there tearing him down all the time, because then you're going to have a weak man and you won't want him anymore.
I love it. This is awesome. Okay, final question. Your life is coming to an end. You've got 30 seconds. I saw this one the other day. I love it. 30 seconds. What would you tell people? 30 seconds left to live. What would it be that you would?
Am I talking to the public, or am I talking to just my close friends and family?
I would say you're talking to the public.
Okay. If I'm talking to the public, it would be that Jesus Christ is at the bottom of every rabbit hole. Every rabbit hole you will ever go down. If you go down far enough, you will find him, because he is the way, he is the truth, he is the life. Christianity as a worldview is the only holistic explanation for why we're here, what our suffering means, what the purpose of this life is, how we can have morality, like all these kind of things, right? So, and you're never going to find those answers anywhere else. You'll try, but you won't come up with anything. We have a great saint. He's about to be canonized as a saint. His name is Father Seraphim Rose. Even if you're like not Orthodox, you're Catholic, you're Protestant, go find one of his books. There's a bunch of his books on Amazon, and he's a guy who tried that. He's a genius. He was a genius 20th century guy. He tried every, degenerate lifestyle. He was a party boy. He tried to find all truth in this world through his own self and through his own means. And if anybody could have done it, it probably would have been him, because he was a super sharp guy. And what he found in the end was that there's only one truth and there's only one way out of the suffering in this life, and it's through Christ.
Yep. I love it. That's perfect. Absolutely. Even the answer to all these things, even if you're in a here and it's being ravaged by these things, the closer you can get to God's image and walk in that and the wisdom of his spirit, that is going to be how you'll turn the tide. And the prayer and the proximity to him, these are the things that are because what you're really talking about, you're talking about the game above the game. You know what I'm saying? It's what we deal with here that's all logical and physical and all this, but then there's a spiritual and supernatural reality that impacts this world. Yes. And that's what we're talking to you guys about. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Rachel, thank you so much for your time today. This has been amazing. It's been huge. Just opening our minds to all the information of how feminism infiltrated America, the roots of where it came from. I want to encourage you guys to get her book. I got to get it as well, and do some research, do some homework, because then you can understand how to unpack these things. Where can people find you? What are you up to these days?
Well, I'm going to fire the old YouTube back up, I think, soon. I had to take almost a year off from doing a lot because my grandma and my dad both got sick with dementia at the same time. So that was like really rough. And I'm kind of their primary caretaker. They're both doing better and more stable now, so I'm finding a little more time to get back into it. Go to Amazon and buy my book, Occult Feminism, The Secret History of Women's Liberation. It's in paperback, Audible, and Kindle now. You can go to my YouTube channel. There's still a bunch of good videos on there. It's just Rachel Wilson. And then my Substack. If you don't want to read a whole book, go to my Substack, because I have a bunch of really good articles on there that are a little shorter, but still well-sourced and really informative. And that is rwilson.substack.com.
Outstanding. And I'm pretty sure you sent me all the links, so we'll make sure they're all in the bio. And thank you. I look forward to hopefully crossing paths, doing some more stuff in the future. You're a wealth of knowledge. I love that you skipped school and you're still such an intellectual unit. You know what I mean? It's just the best. I love it. So more good stuff.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here. So
it's an honor. All right. Thank you. More to come. God bless you. And remember, you guys, blessed are the peacemakers, because they will be called sons of God. Boom.
Boom. What's up, guys? So check it out. Podcast, all the free content, all the things are supported by Patreon. So if you're listening to any of these episodes and it's a blessing to you, it's helping you in life, we now have our Patreon platform up. It's also a really cool place where I consolidate all my content. And so you actually get to see everything, because the algorithms, for whatever reason, don't always show you everything. But anyways, if you want to support the podcast, this stuff's not free. Getting these videos edited, published, paying people to do all this stuff, syndication strategy, putting it all out, it ain't free. But it's an honor to do so. And I believe it's my work and it's what God wants me to do. So if you guys want to join forces and help support that work, I want to invite you to check in the show notes, join us on Patreon. The whole give a cup of coffee. For what you pay for a cup of coffee, you can really help me out quite a bit, actually getting this thing going, keeping this thing going. All right. God bless. Semper Fi. Thank you for being here. We love you guys. Boom. When it comes to the technology you use to protect your home, there's nothing better than Deep Sentinel. AI-driven, human-monitored technology that will keep you and your family safe for the same price you're paying for whatever Ring doorbell system you have. Check out Deep Sentinel. It's such an honor to join forces with these guys. They should be in every single house in the world. Get real-time Overwatch for you and your loved one. And for 10% off, depending on when you're watching this, don't forget to use code Byron at checkout.
Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called sons of God.